4,500 years ago, on a plateau west of the Nile, human beings stacked more than 2 million blocks of stone, most of them heavier than you are, into a mountain so precisely aligned to the compass that modern surveyors still marvel at it. They had no iron tools, no wheels for the heavy work, no pulleys, and for centuries the obvious question hung over the whole thing: how? Then, in a cave on the Red Sea coast, archaeologists found the diary of a man named Mira, an actual logbook written while the Great Pyramid was still going up, describing boats hauling stone to the site. And just last year, scientists mapped a long-dead branch of the Nile that once ran right past the pyramids. Piece by piece, the mystery is being solved, not with aliens, but with rivers, ramps, and rope. Because the Great Pyramid is only the most famous example. All over the world, there are structures that make engineers stop and ask the same question: how did they actually do this? These are 10 of them, and the answers are stranger and more human than you'd think. Let's start the countdown. 4,500 years ago, on a plateau west of the Nile, human beings stacked more than 2 million blocks of stone, most of them heavier than you are, into a mountain so precisely aligned to the compass that modern surveyors still marvel at it. They had no iron tools, no wheels for the heavy work, no pulleys, and for centuries the obvious question hung over the whole thing: how? Then, in a cave on the Red Sea coast, archaeologists found the diary of a man named Mira, an actual logbook written while the Great Pyramid was still going up, describing boats hauling stone to the site. And just last year, scientists mapped a long-dead branch of the Nile that once ran right past the pyramids. Piece by piece, the mystery is being solved, not with aliens, but with rivers, ramps, and rope. Because the Great Pyramid is only the most famous example. All over the world, there are structures that make engineers stop and ask the same question: how did they actually do this? These are 10 of them, and the answers are stranger and more human than you'd think. Let's start the countdown. 10 years into the 20th century, workers on the small island of Malta were cutting a cistern for a new housing development when the ground gave way beneath their tools. They had broken into a chamber, and below it another and another. What they had stumbled into was the Saflieni Hypogeum, an entire underground world carved out of solid limestone, beginning around 6,000 years ago and used for some 15 centuries. The complex descends through 3 levels to about 10 meters beneath the surface, and it served as a necropolis, the resting place of an estimated 6,000 to 7,000 people. But it is not a crude pit. Malta's prehistoric builders, working with stone, obsidian, and antler tools, carved the underground rock to imitate the great above-ground temples. False doorways, corbelled ceilings, and chambers shaped like buildings, all subtracted from the living rock. Some ceilings still carry spirals painted in red ochre, the only known prehistoric paintings on the island. Then there's the oracle room. It's a small carved niche that does something uncanny. A low voice spoken into it resonates and swells, filling the whole chamber. A 2014 acoustic study measured strong resonances in the space, and some researchers have proposed that the builders deliberately engineered the room's sound for ritual effect. That's where the honest science ends and the open question begins. It's genuinely unresolved whether the acoustics were designed on purpose or are simply a happy accident of the chamber's shape. Even researchers involved caution against overstating it. What we do know is that a pre-literate society, with no metal and no written language, carved a cathedral of the dead underground and gave one room a voice. Why exactly, they'll never be able to tell us themselves. In 1963, a man in the Cappadocia region of central Turkey knocked down a wall during a home renovation and found a room behind it he'd never known was there. The room led to a tunnel. The tunnel led down. What he had opened was the entrance to Derinkuyu, an entire city carved straight down into the earth. Cut into soft volcanic rock, Derinkuyu descends roughly 80 meters through multiple levels, by some counts as many as 18 stories, and it could shelter an estimated 20,000 people at once, along with their livestock and food. This was not a cellar, it was a functioning civilization underground. There were stables, kitchens, wine and oil presses, chapels, storerooms, and a room believed to be a religious school. More than 15,000 narrow ventilation shafts fed fresh air to the deepest levels, and one shaft nearly 60 meters long doubled as a well. Each level could be sealed off from the inside with a massive circular stone door, like a millstone rolled across the passage, easy to close from within, nearly impossible to force from without. The engineering is well understood. The ventilation and defenses are, frankly, brilliant. The real debate is about who dug it first, and when. Later it was clearly a refuge for Byzantine Christians hiding from raids right up until the 20th century. But the original excavation is contested. Some scholars credit the Phrygians around the 8th century BC, others push it back to the Hittites 1,000 years earlier. The problem is that soft volcanic rock keeps no datable layers, and the city was recut again and again over the centuries. So a city built to hold 20,000 people underground, one of the largest such places on Earth, still won't tell us the name of whoever first picked up a chisel and started digging down. In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, off the island of Pohnpei, there is a city built on the sea. Nan Madol is a complex of around 100 artificial islets, raised on a coral reef and threaded with canals, which has earned it the nickname the Venice of the Pacific. It was the ceremonial and political heart of the Sordeleur dynasty, and building it was a feat that still isn't fully explained. The walls are made of columnar basalt, long, naturally many-sided logs of volcanic stone, stacked in a crisscross log cabin pattern. Some of these columns are around 20 feet long, and the heaviest stones are estimated at up to 50 tons. By one widely cited estimate, roughly 750,000 tons of basalt were moved to build the site over about 4 centuries. In 2016, researchers using precise dating of the coral in the structures pushed the start of monumental construction back to around 1180 AD, making Nan Madol the earliest known seat of a chiefdom anywhere in the Pacific. And here's the problem the builders left us. The basalt was quarried elsewhere on the island and somehow moved, probably floated or rafted along the coast, then lifted into walls that rise nearly 60 feet, all by a society with no pulleys, no draft animals, and no metal tools, on an island whose population was likely under 30,000. The mainstream explanation is rafts, ramps, and levers driven by enormous coordinated labor. But no rafts, ramps, or rigging survive, and experiments have never quite replicated how the heaviest columns were hoisted into the upper courses. As one Smithsonian account put it bluntly, "We don't know how they brought the columns here, and we don't know how they lifted them up." Rising 200 meters straight out of the jungle in central Sri Lanka is a sheer column of rock, and on top of it, the ruins of a palace. This is Sigiriya, the Lion Rock, built in the 5th century AD by a king named Kashyapa, who had seized the throne by killing his own father and needed a fortress no one could take. The approach alone is theatrical. The final stairway once climbed up through the mouth of a colossal lion figure built of brick and plaster. Today, only its 2 enormous paws survive, flanking the steps. A sheltered pocket in the rock face still holds vivid painted frescoes of women, and a polished stretch of wall, the mirror wall, carries more than 1,000 pieces of graffiti scratched by visitors over 700 years. But the real marvel is at the bottom, in the gardens. Sigiriya's water gardens are among the oldest surviving landscaped gardens in the world, and they were fed by a hydraulic system so well engineered that some of the fountains still work, jetting water into the air after heavy monsoon rain, roughly 1,500 years after they were built. That's the open question here. not whether humans built it, but exactly how 5th-century engineers designed a network of channels, moats, and underground conduits that could generate and hold enough pressure to push water upward, and keep doing it a millennium and a half later. The system is reconstructed from the surviving channels because no plans were left behind. A murderous king's mountain fortress, remembered less for its walls than for its plumbing. High in the sacred valley of Peru, the Inca emperor Pachacuti rebuilt a town called Ollantaytambo in the 15th century and left behind one of the great unfinished puzzles of ancient engineering. At the top of a steep terraced hill stands the Sun Temple, and its centerpiece is the Wall of the 6 monoliths. 6 massive slabs of rose-colored stone, each weighing on the order of tens of tons, stood upright and fitted together with thin stone spacers so tightly you can barely slip a blade between them. The problem is where that stone came from. The quarry sits about 5 kilometers away, on the other side of the Urubamba River and high up the opposite mountainside. So the Inca had to cut these enormous blocks loose, bring them down one mountain, across a river and up another, then fit them with a precision that still stops visitors in their tracks. And they were still doing it when the work suddenly stopped. The slopes are littered with half-moved blocks the locals call tired stones, frozen mid-journey. Because the site was abandoned unfinished, it's actually one of our best windows into how the Inca worked. The archaeologist Jean-Pierre Protzen spent years here and reconstructed the mainstream answer. Blocks were roughed out at the quarry, dragged along carefully built ramps and slide roads, using ropes, rollers, and huge teams of people, and then fitted by patiently pounding them with harder hammerstones. No mortar, no metal blades, just trial, error, and relentless precision. What's still genuinely uncertain is how they got the stones across the river, and the exact sequence of that final, impossibly tight fitting. The tired stones are still lying there, waiting to be moved. Beneath the sand at Saqqara, in the shadow of Egypt's earliest pyramids, runs a set of tunnels that were carved for the burial of bulls. Sacred Apis bulls, believed to be living gods. But it's not the bulls that draw engineers, it's the boxes. Lining the galleries are around 24 gigantic stone sarcophagi, cut from some of the hardest rock in Egypt, granite, basalt, and diorite, and their scale is genuinely difficult to process standing next to one. A single box is nearly 4 meters long, and the estimates for their weight run from around 60 to 80 tons, lid included. The lid alone outweighs several cars. And these were not roughly hollowed out. The surfaces are flat and square to a degree that, even with a straight edge, shows almost no gap. The complex was rediscovered in 1850 by the French archaeologist Auguste Mariette, who followed a buried avenue of sphinxes into the dunes and found the galleries below. The sensational claim you'll hear is that no one could make these by hand, that they must have been machined. Egyptologists don't accept that. The mainstream view is that skilled quarry crews cut the stone at Aswan, shaped it with copper tools and abrasive sand, and polished the faces flat by patient lapping. What is genuinely, legitimately unresolved is the logistics. How boxes weighing as much as a loaded truck were maneuvered down narrow, sloping tunnels and set precisely into their side chambers, deep underground, with the room to work shrinking around them. Moving a 70-ton box across open ground is one thing. Threading it into a crypt below the earth is another, and exactly how they did it is still an open question. Most temples are built up, stone laid on stone. The Kailasa temple in western India was built the opposite way. It was carved downward, out of a single hill of solid basalt, from the top. And that one fact makes it, arguably, the most audacious piece of stoneworking in the ancient world. Around the 8th century AD, under the Rashtrakuta king Krishna I, workers began at the top of a rocky hillside and cut down and inward, freeing an entire multi-story temple from the living rock. Courtyards, towers, pillars, life-sized stone elephants, and a shrine tower rising over 30 meters, all of it one continuous piece of stone. Estimates for the amount of rock removed run from around 150,000 to 200,000 tons. There is no foundation because it was never assembled. The temple is a shape subtracted from a mountain. And that is exactly what makes it so staggering, because carving down gives you no room for error. When you build up with blocks, a mistake can be replaced. Here, a single wrong cut is permanent. You cannot add stone back. Somehow the carvers maintained proportion, symmetry, and alignment across a 3-story monument they could only ever see part of at a time, working from the roof toward the floor. Mainstream scholars agree entirely on the how in principle. Iron chisels, hammers, and generations of extraordinary craftsmen. What's still debated is the project itself, how the work was sequenced, how they held the design together with no margin for mistakes, and how long it truly took, whether a few focused years or a full century across successive kings. In a granite quarry at Aswan in southern Egypt, there is a single stone that explains a great deal about how the ancient Egyptians worked, precisely because they never finished it. Lying in the bedrock, still partly attached to the mountain it was being cut from, is the unfinished obelisk. Had it been completed, it would have stood almost 42 meters tall and weighed somewhere over 1,000 tons, roughly a third larger than any obelisk the Egyptians ever actually raised, the single biggest piece of stone they ever attempted to shape. It was abandoned for a heartbreaking reason. As the workers cut it free, cracks appeared in the granite, and the whole colossal piece was rendered useless. So they simply walked away, and in doing so, froze their own methods in place for 3,500 years. You can still see how they did it. The shaft was being pounded free from the bedrock using balls of dolerite, a stone even harder than granite, and the working lines they marked in ochre are still visible on its surface. So the obelisk actually answers the quarrying question outright. We can see exactly how they cut these giants loose. The part that's still genuinely debated is the raising, how the very largest finished obelisks were tipped upright onto their bases without shattering. The mainstream idea involves earthen ramps and a sand-filled pit that could be slowly emptied to lower the stone into position, and smaller versions have been raised experimentally to test it. But for the true heavyweight class, stones like this one, no single method has ever been confirmed, because the biggest ones that survive are already standing, and this one, the largest of all, never rose at all. And so we return to the plateau at Giza. Around 2560 BC, for the pharaoh Khufu, the ancient Egyptians raised the Great Pyramid, an estimated 2.3 million blocks, most weighing more than 2 tons, stacked to an original height of 146 meters, and for nearly 4,000 years, the tallest structure built by human hands. Its base is level to within centimeters across more than 5 hectares, and its sides are aligned to the points of the compass with an accuracy that still seems impossible for people working with rope and stone. So the question has always been simple and enormous. How? For a long time, the honest answer was, we're not entirely sure. But that has been changing, fast, and not toward mystery. In 2013, on the Red Sea coast, archaeologists found the oldest inscribed papyri ever discovered, the logbook of an official named Merer, written while the pyramid was still being built. Merer's diary records his crew loading fine white limestone onto boats and shipping it up the Nile, by canal, to the Great Pyramid itself, the first eyewitness account of the project's supply chain. Then, in 2024, scientists mapped something remarkable. A long-buried branch of the Nile, over 60 kilometers long, that once flowed right past Giza and dozens of other pyramids. Suddenly, the transport problem made sense. The stone came by water, almost to the doorstep. What's left to debate is the last step, how the blocks were actually raised up the pyramid. The traditional answer is external earthen ramps. One striking alternative proposes a spiral ramp built inside the pyramid for the upper levels, an idea some experts find compelling and others reject, since no other pyramid shows such a feature. That argument isn't settled, and the sheer precision of the leveling and alignment still invites wonder. But notice what's happening. Every year, another real piece of the answer turns up. A diary, a lost river, an experiment. The Great Pyramid was not built by gods or aliens. It was built by people, with boats and ramps and astonishing organization. And the closer we look, the more human and the more impressive the achievement becomes. That's the real secret of the greatest structure on Earth. We're finally learning exactly how they did it.